Good morning, rock stars, and welcome back to day 2 of Don't Break the Long Arm. Tips and tricks to help you quilt your quilts on the frame with confidence. I'm Holly, a Knight of String and Story. I'm so excited to be back with y'all again today. Yesterday was super fun, wasn't it? I really enjoyed getting to connect with y'all, getting to learn a little bit about your long arm quilting stories, what machines you're on, where you are in your journey, some of the things that you're a little bit nervous about. And I'm really excited today to get to dive back in and really talk troubleshooting, especially around the issue of tension. I think this is one of the things that whether you are quilting on a long arm or on a frame or a long arm on a table or even on a domestic machine, this is one of the things I get the most questions and concerns about. And so it is something that I love teaching every time because I know it's something that is going to bring a lot of relief for some of you, and I am here for that. Now, I see that a whole bunch of you have already jumped into the chat and are saying, hi, Kathy, I hope you are safe from that big storm. I caught a glimpse of it on the radar this morning because we caught, kind of just the edge of it. Wow, it looked like a doozy. So if you haven't said hi in the chat yet, please do so. I love getting to say good morning to you. Good morning, Marianne and Barb, Heather, Brenda, Denise, Janice, Frankie, another Denise, or maybe a Denise who just knows Janice, Gwen D, Thomas, Susie, Jan, Dot. It is so great to see you. Susie, major kudos, rock star, on the treadmill out in Olympia. It is early there still. You are getting it done. Done and dusted, hustler. I love it. Rebecca's also in Olympia. All right, y'all are neighbors, so maybe you know each other. Maybe you've crossed paths. Julia in Australia, way to go, rock star. Karen, Linda, Margot, still contemplating getting a frame. Oh, Margot, can I convince you? If you end up not getting a frame, that's totally fine. But I also think it could be fun. So, nothing to lose there. Dawnette, hello. Anthea, hello. It's wonderful to see all of y'all. Are y'all excited to dive in? Should we do the dang thing? All right, let's do it. Here's the thing, Margot. If you got a frame and you have the Amara, then we'd be twinsies. And I can't be mad about twinsies, okay? All right, here we are. Don't break the long arm. Tips and tricks for finishing your quilts on a frame like a quilting rock star. Like the quilting rock star that I know you are, right? I want to remind you, we talked about that yesterday. If you have found your way here, you are already a rock star. It's that simple, all right? We're just going to talk about all the ways to make you feel even more like a rock star, all right? Denise is getting a new to her Innova. I love that. Jan's like, Margo, we're coming for you. Welcome back to day 2. If this is your first time joining us live, again, my name is Holly Ann Knight. I've been teaching free motion quilting online since 2017 and have watched thousands of quilters just like you grow in their confidence to finish their quilts through my blog, workshops, and digital courses. I also teach quilting with rulers. I teach long arming. I love teaching foundation paper piecing. So I teach a lot of different things, but helping you finish your quilts is my number one priority always. I think that there is something really special about getting to take projects completely start to finish. I think there are times when it makes a lot of sense and life circumstances when it makes a lot of sense to quilt by check and to have someone like me long arm your quilts for you. But if you have the ability and the time and the desire to finish your quilts, I am here to enable you wholeheartedly. All right. I also have a shop called String and Story on Maine. We are open 12 to 4 today, by the way, if you happen to be in the area. We teach in-person classes. We have Burnett sewing machines. We carry Paintbrush Studio Solids, Moda, especially Ruby Star Society. We love Ruby Star Society. By the way, this shirt choice is inspired by the sneaky peekies of the new Ruby Star Society fabrics that are coming out much later this fall because there is neon, and I love me some neon, all right? We also have Fabulism fabric, Orifil thread, lots of cool notions, and we would love for you to come through our doors anytime you're in the area. All right. So let's look ahead. Yesterday, we talked about getting started with long arming. Okay. Who needs a long arm? Who benefits from a long arm? What are the guidelines I recommend if you are considering making such a large purchase? Obviously, if you have the space and the money and you want one, that can be a done deal, easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? But for a lot of us, there's a little bit of this back and forth, a little bit like we were just, good naturedly teasing Margot about, of Is this the right choice for me? And am I really going to get the right amount of use from such a large purchase? And is it worth making that leap? So we talked about some of my best guidelines for that. We talked about what to look for in a long arm when you're making a decision about brand and model. We're really focusing on long arms on the frame. So you may have noticed that during our conversation yesterday. And then we talked a little bit about some of the add-ons you may want to consider. All right. Today, we are talking about troubleshooting. So, right after rock stars make that decision to get a long arm, or maybe you've already gotten one and it's in your house, usually the next kind of big, scary thing that rises up is, oh my gosh, what if something goes wrong? What do I do? And we can find ourselves frozen and unable to move forward on our quilting journey because we don't know how to fix it if something breaks, right? And to be very clear, the chances of your long arm actually breaking are pretty low, like really low. These things are built to be used. So they're meant to have all the moving parts and get used a lot. And they're meant to be used by some folks who are brand new to using them and some folks who've had lots and lots of experience. So they're pretty durable. Okay. However, things can go sideways, things can get glitchy. You have to have a concept of some of the things that are going on, especially around tension. And that's what we're going to address today so that you can feel confident putting that quilt on the frame, getting started. And if your tension isn't perfect from the get go, you know what to do. All right. Then tomorrow we're going to answer the question, like, now that I've got this thing on the frame and I feel like I can actually attempt to quilt it, what the heck do I quilt wear? How do I make a quilting plan? How do I pick something that's going to look good on my quilt? And how do I get started? All right. We're also talking this week about my class, Longarm Prep. So all of this is just the introduction to a class that dives much deeper into everything you need to know from setting up your long arm, right? You've got the thing set up and that big question, now what, right? I show you how to load quilts on the frame. I talk about why I recommend floating your quilt tops if you are brand new. I teach you your first hand-guided motifs on the long arm. And then we go step by step, start to finish through 3 different quilting plans. Okay. So all of that's in long arm prep. And we're going to break that down in detail at the end of our time together tomorrow. Okay. Jan says, all of my problems have been user errors. LOL. Tension was the big one and no longer scares me. So this is true for a lot when it comes to free motion quilting, right, Jan? This is very normal that it's a lot of the curve is not that anything is wrong with the long arm. It's that we have to learn how to work with this new tool. We have to build a partnership and almost a trust between us and this big old machine that we've welcomed into our house, right? And understanding how things like tension work is a great way to do that. Yep. Also, I see that Kelly and Becky, and I saw someone else, Linda, have joined us. Welcome, y'all. I'm so glad you're here. All right. If you have not yet snagged the workbook, scan this QR code with your phone, or if you're watching on your phone, jot down that URL that's underneath there, stringandstory.com/LAP-masterclass-registration. All right. And that is going to, it officially registers you for this event, which obviously you've already found, but it will send you this workbook that's pictured on the screen. Okay. And this workbook has in writing a whole bunch of the stuff that we're covering together over these 3 days, because I know that sometimes it's a lot easier to flip through a workbook than to thumb back through a video. Okay. Dot says, I ordered that class, but going through this is very helpful before I dive into that. Dot, that was exactly what I was hoping. I was really hoping that we could kind of break down some of the initial like things in our brain, right? The things that can feel a little overwhelming, so that when you jump into long arm prep, you're like, all right, I'm ready. Let's do this thing. I'm going to be a rock star. All right. Jan says, I would not touch the tension or change the thread until I took your course. A lot of us were taught when we learned how to sew, right? These were things we didn't touch. Don't mess with the thread. Don't mess with the tension, because if it gets wonky, we're not sure how to fix it, right? The thing is that free motion quilting or long arming is different than just piecing on our machine. And we need to do something different in order to get our stitches to look right, right? Okay. So snag that. I'll show you the QR code again at the end of our time together. And with that, let's get started. We have a simple theme this week. You can and will be a long arm quilting rock star. If you are here with me, I am operating under the assumption that you either have a long arm in your house that you wish you felt more confident using, and that you are not using as much as, would bring you the greatest joy. You have a long arm on its way to you, or you are seriously considering making that purchase. My entire goal during these 3 days, whether you join me in long arm prep or not, right? I would love for all of you to join me in long arm prep. It's big fun. But if all we do together is these 3 days, I want you to leave our time together believing this statement. you are capable of learning how to use this big old machine and finish your quilts. And they're going to look awesome. And it's going to be so exciting. All right. So let's talk about how to do that. We do this for joy units. At no point, right, do I want you to feel dragged down by your long arm. And I know there have been times in my journey, I remember so vividly that when I had gotten my first long arm, it was a Tin Lizzie 18. I was running a quilting nonprofit at the time. We were making quilts for kids with cancer. And this incredibly generous human had upgraded her long arm, and she had gifted Quilts for Cure this Tin Lizzie 18. And she said, I want you to use it to finish quilts for those kids. I want you to use it on your quilts, whatever you want to use it for. I just think it's in good hands with you, right? So this machine came to live with me. And I started out really strong. I had been practicing my free motion quilting on my domestic machine. I found that those skills translated beautifully. And then I loaded my first like really serious quilt onto the frame. And it was my Bonnie Hunter en Provence quilt. And I was so proud of it. It had taken me like 9-10 months to piece. I had changed up the colors. I had made it very scrappy. This quilt is literally on my bed right now. Like, I love this quilt. And I had drawn out this fabulous custom quilting situation on it. And as I started to quilt, this had bulkier seams than anything that I had ever quilted before. And I was like, dang, I cannot get my foot over these seams. Now, I had a standard long arm ruler foot on my Tin Lizzie 18. I knew nothing about any other feet. Okay. Something I would do differently now is I would reach for what's called a glide foot. It looks like someone took a little plastic spoon and punched a hole through it for your needle, and it moves over bulky seams a lot easier. I didn't have one of these yet. I didn't even know what they were. I had figured out this little screw on the top of my long arm that I could raise the presser foot up and create more room underneath. And so I'm quilting along, and I began to have just thread break after thread break after thread break. All right. To the point that little baby influencer Holly Ann, got on the internet and emailed like 5 or 6 different thread companies and was like, I just got this new long arm. My thread keeps breaking. Can I try yours to see if it won't break? And bless these humans, they were very generous, and they sent me a whole bunch of thread samples, and nothing worked. Somehow I managed to eventually get this quilt quilted, but the thread breaks, I about lost it. I remember crying. I remember cursing. I was so upset because things had been going so well. And after I finished that quilt, it was a long, long time before I put anything on my frame. It just sat, and I felt so much guilt. I'd been given this really beautiful gift and this amazing opportunity that I had had no anticipation of being able to touch a long arm, use a long arm, own a long arm for years into my quilting journey, right? I thought this was going to be a very future thing, and I was handed this opportunity, and I simultaneously felt like I was wasting it and that I was failing at it, right? And then I stumbled somewhere in the wild west of the internet upon this lovely little nugget, right? That changed everything. And I'm going to tell you more about how I fixed that in just a second. But the point of this story for the moment, right, is that we quilt for joy units. And my frustration on that quilt, I lost a lot of joy for a while on my long arming, right? And part of what I want to do with the time that we spend together and with sharing everything I can think of to share about the journey that I've been on and what I've learned is that I don't want you to have to lose your joy units while you stumble around looking for a solution, right? I want to be able to create solutions and opportunities for you to find the information that you need more efficiently so that we can really enjoy this. It's okay to feel a little nervous as you're getting started, but remember, ultimately, this is all about fun and creativity. And I saw this beautiful thing on Instagram today about the power of metabolizing the difficult things in life with the creativity of our hands. And that is the thing that binds all of us together. And even though we're going to talk about the technical stuff of tension today, I want you to remember that that joy and creativity is at the heart of everything we're doing. Okay? All right. Let's keep going. And to answer your question, Margot, I absolutely think that going through long arm prep will help you make a decision about the frame. Yep. Great question. I think the next 2 days will probably help too. But yeah. So thread tension. This is the big thing that rises up like the monster out of a swamp and stops a whole lot of us in our tracks. All right. And that's what happened to me with the thread breaking on En Provence. So yesterday we talked about how to choose a machine and what you need to do to get started, right? And the tools that I recommended that you have to get started. This is my Handy Quilter Moxie. This is the machine that is in this room with me right now. I have the 10-foot frame. It can also be shortened down to an 8-foot frame, or you can purchase a different model that is a 5-foot frame. Okay, it has a 15-inch throat space, or the new Moxie XL has an 18-inch throat space, just to give you the little lowdown on this machine. Let's talk about what to do when the hits the fan and the back of your quilt looks like this, because it happens to all of us. You'll notice down in the left-hand corner the little pile of threads I'm in the process of unpicking. This is not my worst thread unpicking story, but it's probably my second worst thread unpicking story. This was a quilt that was going to Quilts Market to show off a new line of fabric many moons ago. And I had stuff go bonkers on the back after I'd done all of this really detailed rift quilting. It was so frustrating. So how do we fix this? Here's how tension works. All right. Tension is a game of tug of war. No matter what we, sorry, Debbie, I just saw your comment and the all caps is perfect. We do this for fun. You have got to remember that, right? We all have to remember that. This is a thing we have chosen to do, and it is supposed to be fun. So let's keep the joy in it. All right. So whether you are on the most simple sewing machine, a little Singer featherweight, or you are on the most expensive Bernina, that $9.90 is coming out, y'all. Tension is a game of tug of war. Okay. You have your needle thread, comes off the spool, through the machine, right? The do through the machine, it's going through what are called tension discs, and they look like little cymbals. Remember those little circus monkey toys that, like, right? And I'm sure there's something problematic about those that I don't know. But essentially there's little symbols in there. And when we make our tension tighter, the way that we do that is there's a spring that pushes those little symbols together harder. And when we loosen our tension, we release a little bit of pressure on those little symbols, okay? So if you've ever threaded your machine and it had been doing fine, and maybe you wound a bobbin and then you rethreaded your machine and all of a sudden it was just ghastly, the first thing that you want to check is to make sure that you actually flossed into those tension discs. What's great about a long arm is that disc is super visible right on the outside of the machine, okay? Unless you're on a Bernina, this is the thing that I think makes threading a Bernina long arm a little bit annoying to me. It's beautifully designed. You get used to it. I'm just, petty. And because I like to be able to see that on my long arm, because I will sit there and go, and floss it into that disc, okay? So thread comes off the spool, flosses through your tension disc, comes down through your needle. Down in the bobbin, our bobbin goes through a little bobbin race. I can't grab my bobbin race out fast enough, otherwise I would show you. And whether you have a plastic drop-in bobbin or you have the metal bobbin of a long arm, there's a little metal piece that our thread flosses under, and that creates a little bit of resistance on your thread. Now, that is something that on most domestic machines with that drop-in bobbin, you don't mess with, right? It's kind of fixed. That's a fixed variable in this equation. On your long arm, you can actually adjust the pressure of that little metal bit up against the casing. I have 75,000 people texting me. I'm so sorry. You can actually adjust the pressure of that little bit of metal up against the casing and put more friction on your bobbin thread as well. That's where a toa gauge comes in. We'll talk about it in a second, okay? But when both of these threads are threaded, your needle goes down and you get your top thread makes a little loop around the bobbin race and it twists with that bobbin thread and it creates a little twist like this. And then both those threads go back to their respective sides and the top thread lays on top of your project and the bobbin thread runs along the bottom of your project until the next needle hole where they twist together again and keep going, okay? Ideally, balanced tension means that that twist lands inside your quilt, right? So the tug of war game is equal. When you end up with eyelashes, things that look like this on the back of your quilt, that means that there's more tension on the bobbin thread than on the top thread. And that little loop that's being made to pick up the bobbin thread is too loose. And so the extra thread is landing and hanging out on the back of the quilt. And it looks like those little spider webs or eyelashes. If you have any kind of goobering on the top side of your project, or if you have thread breaks, That means your top thread has more resistance and it's tugging harder, okay? And it's winning that game of tug of war. We want thread tension tug of war to be a draw every single time, okay? Does that make sense? This was the first thing that I really had to grasp when I started sewing, because my crazy brain definitely thought that those threads were like switching sides on the project and that all kind of magical nonsense was happening, right? But understanding that the top thread stays on the top of the project, the bottom thread stays on the bottom of the project, and we want that tug of war to be equal is the foundational thing you need to know to understand tension, okay? Now, here are my top tension tips, especially for long armors, right? So use a toa gauge. We looked at a picture of a toa gauge yesterday. It looks like this, okay? And what you do here is you take your little bobbin casing off your long arm and you drop it in, okay? And your thread goes under one screw and up over another, and then you can give a little tug off to the side, and you see that little measuring gauge on the side of the device. That measures tension, which is measured in a unit called a micronewton, okay? We want our bobbin thread to have 180 to 220 micronewtons of resistance. I can't explain to you exactly what a micronewton is. I just know that that's the sweet spot, okay? For me, when I'm working with Aurifil 50 weight thread, which is what I use most of the time, I prefer that to be at about 180. That's my sweet spot. Like that 180 to 200 end of that range is my sweet spot on the toa gauge, okay? On the side of your little bobbin casing, there's two screws. One screw just holds the piece of metal on. The other screw actually presses it up against the bobbin casing more or less, kind of like the little cymbal tension discs that are on the side of your long arm, okay? You can loosen or tighten that screw a little bit, well, depending on whether you want to increase or decrease that toa gauge tension, all right? This is the first thing that you do when you adjust your tension, okay? Second, if you're getting eyelashes on the back, that means your tension is too loose, your top tension. Once that toa gauge has helped you set your bobbin tension, we don't mess with it, unless we have some reason to believe that it has jiggled and changed and needs to be readjusted. But if we've just set that, we now do not mess with our bobbin tension. It is set. It is good. Everything from this point forward is adding or relieving resistance on the top thread, okay? So if you get those eyelashes on the back at this point, you're going to tighten your top thread tension. On my long arms, there's a little knob on the side. I turn it away from me to tighten it because righty-tighty, okay? If I need to loosen it up, I turn it towards me, lefty-loosey. This is one of the interesting differences that I have noticed between the Handy Quilter Moxie and the Handy Quilter Amara. I'm very excited to write a compare and contrast blog post about these two soon, but sneak peek for y'all. On the Moxie, you just turn it and you play around with it. On the Amara, they actually assign a number to the different amounts of tension, and it shows up on the screen. So I can kind of gauge where I'm at based on that number on my screen. And I'm finding that reference to be really helpful. Okay. Let's see. Michelle says, hi, that's where I'm on my long arm now. Thread breaking. I've had to adjust timing. Oh, interesting. Hesitant to use my millie now. Looking forward to getting my joy back. Yes. Yes. So adjusting your bobbin tension is different than adjusting your timing. So timing is the relationship between when your needle is going up and down and when that bobbin case is rotating. And that's usually done by a machine maintenance human. Okay. So someone who has a really good knowledge of mechanics. I am not that human. I have a couple of people on my team who are hoping to be that human. Okay. But if you're adjusting that bobbin tension, that's going to be with your toa gauge. Now, if you are getting thread breaks and skipped stitches, that means that instead of when that top thread comes down and it makes the loop to pick up your bobbin thread, if there's extra thread there, that's how we get eyelashes on the back. If you're getting skipped stitches or thread breaks, it means that it's not quite getting enough thread dropped down into the bobbin race in order to successfully snag that bobbin thread. Or when it tries to snag it and then pulls back up, it pulls so hard that it breaks your top thread. Okay. In order to fix that, we're going to want to loosen our top tension just a little, release a little bit more thread down into the bobbin race. All right. So here's the thing about the toa gauge again. Let me see if I still have that blog pulled up for y'all, because I dropped this in the chat yesterday. If you have questions, drop them in the chat for me. This has been Tension 101, right? There are a few other things that can cause weird things to happen with your tension. And we're going to talk about those in just a second, but I want to make sure this part makes sense first. If you're catching this on the replay and can't see the link in the chat, it's stringandstory.com/blog/TOA gauge, TOWAGAUGE. Two very odd words, but here we are. All right. Now, let's talk about random things that can mess up our tension. And this is what happened with me and the En Provence quilt that I did not understand, and that it took me an amazing amount of internet diving to finally figure out. Okay. Random things that can mess up tension is anything else that needs to be adjusted on your machine. So if your needle is dull, and that means that when it's going down in there, it's not quite hitting the right spot on the bobbin race, and it's not quite pulling the thread back up quite right. These are things that, as you can tell by how I'm talking, I don't fully understand how they affect the tension. I just know that they do. Okay. So a dull needle, too much or too little tension on the backing, right? So how tight or loose your quilt actually is on the frame. I err towards a tight backing. I tend to like a good amount of tension on my quilts. I like it to be a little bouncy when I thump it, once I load it, a little bit more than your average bear, right? I have noticed that speaking with other long armors that I put a little bit more tension on mine. Part of my theory for that is because I'm hand guiding. I don't know. But I've definitely noticed if I get a little excited with how tight I put that backing on there, I will get more of an increase of things like skip stitches. It interferes with how the thread is moving through the fabric, okay? Quilting like a speed demon can definitely break your thread. I am guilty of this one often, right? Because when the thread is coming through the machine and going along the scarf of that needle, friction happens. So if I'm moving really, really fast and it's putting any kind of torque on that needle, or the needle's just having to go through the fabric really, really fast, it can increase friction and make the thread more likely to break. Okay. The thing that caused the issue with the En Provence quilt was that I had raised my presser foot. And apparently this can affect the way that the thread tension is coming down the needle and heading down into the bobbin race, and is known for causing thread breaks. I tried all those different brands of thread. Some worked better than others just because of their raw tensile strength with this situation, right? But ultimately, the way that I fixed my long arm and found my joy back was stumbling upon this little nugget in a forum somewhere deep in the bowels of the internet that said, sometimes if your presser foot is too high, it can cause thread breaks. Once upon a time, someone explained to me exactly why this is. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't remember the exact explanation. I just know that now I'm a little extra careful about messing with my foot height, okay? And instead of raising up my foot to go over bulky seams, I use a glide foot, and things are much more beautiful, all right? You'll notice my cheeky comment down at the bottom of the list of, Mercury being in the microwave or Mercury in retrograde. And what I mean by that is sometimes stuff just goes funny. I will swear that I have had long arms that when there is a big storm rolling in, I cannot get the tension right to save my life, right? Now, I might be the problem there, right? Jan, we talked earlier about user error. I definitely notice that if I am anxious or stressed and I am long arming, I am more likely to have tension issues, especially on the thread break side, right? My body being able to move smoothly and evenly as I'm guiding that big old machine is an important variable in getting pretty stitches, right? But sometimes I think stuff just goes sideways, right? This is mechanics. We have biomechanics going on with us. And if you've gone through this whole list of stuff and you're starting to find yourself getting frustrated, sometimes I recommend just turning the long arm off, go eat a snack, drink some water, take a walk, come back and try again. Right? Sometimes there's something that we missed, and sometimes we're just nervous about something and we're having a hard time quilting smoothly and getting those stitches to look good. All right. So I say that to reassure you, not to discourage you. 99% of the time, we can identify exactly what's going on with a long arm and get it sorted out. And sometimes we just need to take a break. Okay. Now, if we're going to be using our long arm, and we are because we are long arm quilting rock stars, and we've got our tension set and we are happily quilting quilt after quilt, how do we take care of this big old machine? Okay. Yeah, Jan, exactly. If I'm in a hurry, it is always not a good thing. Amen. I will never have more thread breaks on a project than when I am rushing. Oh my gosh, it's horrible. How do we take care of this big old machine? Because as you can imagine, it's not super easy to toss it in the back of your car and take it for service, right? So we want to keep it operating nicely without outside influence. A long arm is meant to be used, all right? I sometimes compare a long arm to a car, not because of just the price point, but because of the maintenance. So having good maintenance habits is what's going to make your car last a long time. Having good maintenance habits is what's going to make your long arm last for a long time too. Long arms are designed to run and run and run and run with minimal outside interference as long as you do a few simple things, okay? First, every single time you change your bobbin, you need to brush all of the lint out of your bobbin race. Do not push lint in. Do not blow it with your breath or with a can, right? Get a pipe cleaner or a brush or one of those cool little silicone tools that I've been starting to see around. Gather that lint and bring it out of the machine and into the trash can, okay? It will gum things up. That can affect tension, right? If lint gets packed in there, you will have all kinds of issues with your stitches. If that lint travels further back into your machine near the electronics where that motor is working and heat is being generated, it can be a fire risk, okay? I don't actually know any horror stories of someone who has managed to catch a sewing machine on fire, but they must exist because I've always heard about what it's kind of like dryer lint, right? You don't hear a lot of stories about a dryer fire, but theoretically it's possible. So lint out, okay? Then after each quilt, so that's every single bobbin. So if you have a quilt that takes 6 bobbins, you need to be cleaning out that bobbin race at least 6 times, okay? After each quilt, I recommend cleaning your whole machine and frame. So get a nice soft cloth. I like to use a nice soft flannel cloth. Sometimes I'll just use baby wipes. Kind of depends on what I have handy. Just a little bit of water on there, right? It's not sopping. It's just a little damp enough to help the dust stick. And you want to wipe down all the rails of your machine and actually gently wipe off the exterior of your machine. That's because lint is going to gather along the way. Lint is being generated from your fabric, especially from your batting, and some is being generated from your thread. It's a linty process. We want to keep our area clean. That's going to help make sure that your long arm continues to run smoothly along the frame, that we're not going to have any kind of bumps or snags along the way. It's going to keep everything looking prettier, keep your sewing room cleaner, and help prevent your allergies from acting up. But it's also going to help to make sure that your stitch regulators can work well, right? Those little lasers, just like a little laser mouse, rely on being able to sense their own movement, and dust can cloud that process and result in uneven stitches, skip stitches, etc. Okay? You should oil periodically. If you're doing really big quilts, like bed-size quilts, you might oil your machine after each one when you do this other cleaning process. That might be part of what you do. If you're more like me and you tend to do several smaller projects back to back, then every 2 or 3 projects, I'm going to make sure my machine gets oiled. I can definitely start to hear it. The machine gets louder when it needs more oil because that means those metal parts are not going along each other smoothly. But just like your domestic sewing machine, if we just do it periodically, we're going to stay on top of it and everything will continue to move smoothly. When you oil your machine, change your needle. Okay. So again, if you're doing 2 or 3 smaller projects back to back, you may not need to change your needle after each one, but you'll definitely want to change it after a few projects. If you're doing large bed-size quilts, especially with a lot of intricate quilting where that needle's going up and down a lot and you've got a lot of stitches in a project, make sure that you change your needle after each project. At a bare minimum, change your needle once a month. Okay. If you get to the first of the month and you can't remember when you've changed your needle, change it. Okay. A sharper needle is going to have better stitches. It's going to go through your fabric better. It's going to create a prettier effect and be less likely to do things like snag your fabric as you're going along. All right. Finally, let's talk about taking care of you. You are the other really important factor in this long arm quilting process. So making sure that you're holding your body well is going to do things like prevent pain and injury during the process. Okay. So needles and oil extend the life of your machine. Here's my Amara again. And proper posture is how we take good care of ourselves and extend our quilting time and our comfort and our joy units in our quilting time. It's the secret sauce and it's going to help you keep feeling strong and capable while you're long arming. Poor posture will sap your energy and it will muddle your quilting. When I am too tired to maintain poor posture, my quilting suffers and it looks less good. Okay. If you're going to quilt for a long time, you may also want to consider some anti-fatigue mats to be standing on, and you always want to be wearing a really good pair of shoes. Your hips will thank you. I also have a tendency to wear compression socks or compression sleeves to keep some compression on my calves when I'm working. It's going to help improve circulation as I tend to be pretty stationary and just, bearing a lot of weight down through my legs. We want to make sure that that blood flow is continuing. Okay. So the good posture checklist, you want to have a stacked body. So that means your head is over your shoulders, is over your hips, is over your knees, is over your toes, right? Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Really and truly. We don't want to be hunched like this. We don't want to stick our neck out at some funky angle. We don't want to have our back rolled up, and we don't want to be quilting off to one side, right? We want to keep our body over itself. Keep a little bit of relaxation in your knees. Don't lock them out. Good heavens, please don't lock them and then black out in front of the long arm. That would be so dangerous. We don't want to do that. All right. We want to be able to feel our core muscles. So that's not just our abs on the front of our body. We want to be able to feel those strong muscles down along our spine. This is how we're going to keep our body strong and stable and counter the weight of that long arm. Okay. Most of the movement of your machine, right? Your shoulders and your arms are going to be doing the finessing of it. But a lot of that is coming from the center of our body. That's the strongest part of our body. That's how we're going to be able to move that big machine without injury. Okay. Then you want to have a nice tall spine. If you cannot long arm without hunching really close to your work, you need more light. All right. I've told the story a million times. I will tell it again. When I first started long arming, I knew none of this. And in order to do detail work, I held the handle of my long arm and did this. Notice what a problem, right? And I started having excruciating shoulder and neck pain on one side, which in retrospect feels a little bit obvious that that would happen, right? Went to my chiropractor. My childhood chiropractor was in the process of retiring. My new chiropractor had bought the practice. And the first time Dr. Mario adjusted me, he said, "I have such an interesting question for you." And I'm like, shoot, what's the question? He goes, "Do you play rugby?" Now, listen, I have a friend who plays rugby. Her name is Courtney. And if you put us side by side, you would understand how laughable this question is, because Courtney's shoulders are, out here somewhere, and she looks like she's going to take you out, right? I have very slight shoulders. I am a small human. It is not uncommon when people meet me to go, "Oh my gosh, you're so much shorter than I thought you were." Because no, I don't play rugby. I would get turned into a pancake. But it turns out that what I had been doing with my shoulder is a common throwing injury, right? And so doing something like rugby or carrying a ball under your arm, you get that same kind of hiked up motion and that same injury, okay? Chiropractic care took care of it. Good posture has kept it at bay all these years since, okay? I want you to think about your brain posture in this too, right? This is that mindset that we've been sprinkling throughout all of our time together. And that means just simply holding on to what I've been telling you over and over and over again, that as you are stacking that body tall and proud, I want you to speak kind, proud thoughts in your brain as well. You are a whole quilting rock star. And it is okay if, as you are getting started, you have not figured everything out. And sometimes your quilting doesn't look on your quilt the way it looks in your head yet. It will get there. Keep your chin up and remember that practice makes progress. Okay. All right. We have covered a lot of ground today. So we have talked about tension, how it works, and how to get it perfect. We have talked about how to take care of our long arms, and we have talked about how to take care of our bodies. Tomorrow, we are going to talk about what to actually quilt on our quilts, and then dive into the nitty-gritty of what actually is included in long arm prep and decide if that is the class that is indeed the right next step for you. I hope this has been super helpful for some of these troubleshooting things that I think come up a lot when we're getting started long arming, like how do I fix my tension? How come my body hurts when I long arm? And my brain just left me. And how do I actually maintain this big machine? All right. If you have any closing questions for today, please drop them in the chat. I would love to answer them before we wrap up. All right. Your reminders for tomorrow, click like on this video and subscribe on my YouTube channel so that it is easier for yourself and others to find not only these videos that we've been enjoying together this week, but other videos that I put out to help you along your quilting journey. Join me again tomorrow at 11 a.m. for day 3 of this 3-part series. Invite a friend to join. The same QR code and URL that allows you to get this workbook is also what you can send your friends. Invite them to come join us. They can catch the replays of days 1 and 2, and join us live tomorrow so they have an opportunity to ask questions in real time. Y'all, thank you so much for your time. It's a delight to spend this morning with you, and I look forward to being with y'all tomorrow and talking a little bit more about long arm prep. Bye for now.